gentlemen, welcome. This is Muskan from Datamatics. Thank you for joining our webinar on Level Up Your P2P Game, Streamlining Procurement with Generative AI from Source to Pay. Before we officially begin, let's cover a few housekeeping announcements. If you've got questions or thoughts, you can share them in the dedicated tab and we will address them at the end of the session. Just as a heads up, we've muted all lines for the default settings of the webinar. To keep things interactive, we'll be launching 3 poll questions for you to share your thoughts and insights. Also, stay tuned for a feedback survey that will appear shortly after the webinar concludes. We will be sharing the recording and presentation deck by tomorrow. Also, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. With 20 years of experience in project management for finance and digital transformation, Supraja has a strong track record in maintaining procure-to-pay solutions, software testing, and F&A projects in manufacturing and consultancy, along with US taxation. Supraja is a motivated, innovative team player known for her communication and problem-solving skills. Thank you so much for being with us today, Supraja. The floor is now yours to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Muskan. Thanks a lot. So, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you've joined from. Thanks for joining in. And today's topic is P2P and how AI has actually captured the market, or how it's going to be capturing the market. Basically, let's start with facts. By 2026, 30% of the new applications will use AI to drive personalized, adaptive user interfaces, from up less than 5% today. So this is a chart released by Gartner. And if you see here, 0 to 1 years, we will have generative AI virtual assistants in the application related tab. And you will see that within a span of 1 to 3 years, almost AI code generation and generative AI applications is going to be the way of life. And how is it going to be done? Most of the finance platforms, leave aside P2P, even risk management, portfolio, algorithm, fraud detection, name it, and everything is going to be influenced by AI. So what is generative AI and how is it exactly different from the normal AI? That is what the seminar is all about, and how we are going to be implementing the same in the P2P space of life is what we are going to talk about. We'll move to the next slide. So what do we need here? We need platforms which are industry-centric and which are process-centric. So what does this mean? Which means an application which will learn, which will do a problem solving, which will have reasoning, which will have perception and language understanding, along with common sense. If all this can be completed, then AI can definitely take over humans, isn't it? So basically, what is the difference between a normal AI and a generative AI? In a normal AI, the point is the focus is narrow, which means the application would be able to do only the job assigned to it. And it is very cornered on a specific task. As far as generative AI is concerned, the change is it's a broad capability. It will be able to think like a human, decide like a human, and match the intelligence of a human. That is what is again given here. Like generative engagement, probabilistic inputs, operational AI multimodal foundational models, automated executions, and targeted business value. So when we say operational AI multimodal foundation models, this relates to every space of the P2P, be it a procurement or the vendor management or the invoice processing. We will see that in the next slides too. Moving on to the next slide. In short, redesign Procure-to-pay. What do we have in Procure-to-pay? Procurement portal, which helps in price benchmarking, price variance, contract compliance, and supplier management, which gives us the visibility of savings. Again, supplier management contains supplier selection, dynamic tendering, contract management, invoice processing, again with a multiple three-way matching or a four-way matching, as the industry calls, 100% touchless processes, and detailed reconciliation. So all this is going to be giving us the outcome of visibility of savings, realization of the savings, best value across the organization, and back office savings, obviously. How are we going to achieve it? With one tool called as generative AI. For me and for our organization, we see the entire redesigning of the procure-to-pay process as a combination of multiple elements. These elements are AI, that is artificial intelligence, machine learning, that is ML, RPA, that is robotic process automation, NLP, that is natural language processing, and a workflow. It cannot be a one-stop solution. It has to be a combination of all these solutions putting together. What does our AI do? AI solves complex tasks. It can help us in making reasoning. It can help us in analyzing the data. What does machine learning do? Machine learning uses an algorithm to solve complex problems. What does an RPA do? RPA completes mundane tasks into monotonous tasks that can be replaced by a robot instead of a human being. What is an NLP? That is natural language processing, wherein anyone from anywhere can ask questions and a chatbot just replies, right? So this is based on natural language processing. Next is the workflow. Workflow is again a software which is built in to mimic activities or robotic activities which can help in sequencing the operations and thereby helping us to organize the flow completely. So when we talk about procure-to-pay, what does actually come into our mind? Basically, the entire P2P operations plus your spend analytics, right? So that is where exactly we will be looking at. So can we request Muskan to launch the poll right now, please? So what is your organization's current level of AI adoption in the procurement process? The first option is no AI adoption yet. Second one is it's at the early stages of exploration or piloting AI specific areas. Third one is moderate AI integration across some processes. So we will give you 45 seconds to answer these so that our seminar is on an interactive mode as well. Just let me know once we receive the answers and the poll results are done. Okay, so here we have the results. No AI adoption yet, 29%. Early stages of exploration or piloting AI specific areas, 29%. Moderate AI integration across some processes, 43%. Great. So we have the audience split very clearly between moderate adoption and initial stages of adoption. So that is where we are going to give you some insights on what could be the areas of automation. Yeah. But I would want you to also answer another question. Can we have the second poll, please? The poll two is, which area of procure-to-pay do you believe would benefit most from generative AI in your organization? Is it going to be supplier shortlisting, or it's going to be contract generation and management, or it's going to be invoice processing and payments, or is it analytics? Again, similarly, you will have 45 seconds to answer this. Let's have the results now. Okay. Supplier shortlisting is with 11%. Contract generation and management is with 11% again. Invoice processing and payments is at 56%. And analytics is at 22%. That's great. So, yes, I do agree to some extent that invoice processing has a better way of automation. However, there are automation perspectives in almost all the sections that we talk about. So we'll go one by one. Okay. So first thing is areas of automation in procurement. Starting from the PR creation to the PR completion, approval of the PR, along with RFI, RFP rating evaluation. The procurement team needs an informed decision, right? So this informed decision is from the AI. Now, when we say informed decision, how does this informed decision comes? Suppose if we have a scenario like there is a global sourcing which is happening, and in the global sourcing, you have options from almost every corner of the world, right? So in this global sourcing options, the spend classifications are very, very clear. And the bots can help in buying assistance, plus bots for e-auctions are also possible. Along with this, if you get a clear vendor rating on a clear informed decision, which will be like, the vendors are being rated and on the basis of their previously supplied goods, services, so on and so forth. And if you can extract this data from the market space as well, and the system can throw you details about the anomalies which the vendor is associated with, and thereby vendor feedbacks from other sources. Wouldn't that be great? So that is what we are talking about automation in procurement. So here, as far as the vendor feedbacks are concerned, it can be taken from anywhere on the web. The system can just pull the data and throw it across to you. So that is going to be a complete help for making an informed decision on who the vendor would be and how he would be sourced. Along with that, in case of procurement, we have the RFP and the RFI also. Certainly, there are case studies wherein a bot is doing e-auction. So that is the newest case study which has come up in the AI ML part. And anytime if a bot can do, e-auctions, then obviously there is not going to be any biased decision or there is not going to be any favoritism is what we could clearly call it as. Yeah. Going to the next slide. Areas of automation in vendor management. So vendor management is one of the biggest and toughest tasks that can be called for in an organization. Why? Because master data management or the vendor database management is one of the most significant areas which would be needed for Gen AI processing. Garbage in is going to be garbage out, obviously. So if the vendor data is not correct, then obviously the data which is going to come in is not going to be of any use. Vendor catalog updates, again, is going to be a very clear part of the AI part. Why? Because the system can take in data from different websites which are available on the market, and it could collate data automatically instead of doing it manually. So that is again going to be an advantage. Verification of documents submitted by vendors during onboarding. This is a hideous task, and especially when you have licensing certificates and other important compliance documents, it would help if a robot is going to be doing this monotonous activity multiple times, and it could help you in compiling the data in a very, very short time and in an easier manner. So that is what is going to change the outlook of vendor management. Next is virtual assistants and navigations on FAQs. What happens in an FAQ is that not only the vendor who is new to your system is going to ask you multiple questions, but the old vendor is also going to ask you some questions like, what is my invoice payment? Where is my invoice right now? Whether it's being processed or not, and so on and so forth. If there is a bot which is answering, again, instead of having a person answer this, one, the bot doesn't take a holiday. Second, bot works 24/7, and the vendor gets his answer on an immediate basis, on a real-time basis. And that is what makes the actual difference. Supplier risk management, again, big data. Why? Because supplier risk management is exactly where we are going to get the blacklisted vendors, the latest price quoted by the vendors, latest price quoted by the competitive vendors, so on and so forth. So if we can, signify all these into one checklist, then that would be like, again, what we saw earlier. It is going to be a combination of your AI, that is your artificial intelligence, where you are using it to collate data, machine learning, again, where you're going to be looking at how the existing going to help you, like what we saw in vendor catalog update. Third one is going to be your NLP, which is going to be your chatbots that we talked about in the virtual assistants or the navigation of FAQs. And fourth one is going to be your RPA or your workflow, wherein your verification of documents submitted by the vendors during onboarding are being verified and checked. Similarly, the supplier risk management, again, is going to give you a big idea about, in case of a global supplier engagement, how do you go ahead with a new supplier, a new vendor, whether to onboard them, what is their credit ratings. A differential treatment for each of these vendors based on such analysis is going to give a clear visibility to the procurement team, again, to deal with the vendor on a time-to-time basis. If you have any questions at any point of time, please note it down and you could put it on the chat box, and we will answer the question once the session is done. We'll move to the next slide now. Areas of automation in invoice processing. So the invoice processing part, as many of you answered in the poll, it's going to be automated and it's going to be very quickly automated. So now in this case of scenario, if you see, we talked about the PR creation, the PR getting approved, and then based on that, the vendor is being shortlisted. And once the vendor is shortlisted, the PR, it's getting converted to a PO, and then it is being submitted to the vendor for his approval. From there, the invoice processing part starts. The vendor is submitting the invoice, and this invoice could be done on an OCR. What is an OCR? It is optical character recognition, wherein the invoice, whether it is a printed copy or a handwritten copy, can be easily captured for its header and its line items. Once the data capture is completed, the data which is gotten from the invoice is compared with the master data. When we say master data, it could be your PO data, it could be your GRN data, and there could be a three-way matching, that is an auto three-way matching, as represented in the workflow below. And then in case of an exception, it could be routed for an approval or an exception routing. And then based on the routing, the invoice could be packed or posted on the ERP. And thereby, the payment processing could also be completed on the basis of payment terms. Now, when we talk about all these things, we also talk about, fraudulent invoices or duplicate invoices which come into the system. What do we do with these duplicate invoices? If there is a system or a workflow which can identify these duplicates or a probable duplicates and provide us that information with the original invoice and the duplicate invoice, it becomes much, much more easier for the person working in the organization to delete off the duplicate invoices and process only the correct invoices. The next one is, again, the combination of RPA, right? There are mundane activities such as IBD, that is inbound delivery in a manufacturing organization, or it is a goods received notes. So all these could be just captured, or it could be, captured in the ERP with the help of RPA. So when we say RPA, robotic process automation, becomes much, much more easier because the turnaround time of a robot is definitely more than a human. So other than this, there could be other features such as auto GL coding, cost center verification, or cost center validation, and then auto routing to different people. When we say auto routing to different people, it again means like, there could be financial, supports like up to say USD 400,000, it could be routed to one person. Over and above 400,000 could be routed to 2 levels or 3 levels. So such configurations could also be done using a work. Next is supporting document classification. So not every supporting document is important, but neither can that be ignored. If a robot can look at these supporting documents and help us classify these documents and group it into the ones which needs to be looked at and which need not be looked at, then it makes the life of the invoice processor much, much more easier. So now, again, as we just mentioned, we saw that this is again not either ML or RPA alone, but it is going to be a combination of everything. Yeah. So now here again, we are going to be talking about the vendor query response. Again, we can also talk about, how the vendor is having a complete transparency on the entire process, and also on how the vendor would be able to interact between the systems without interacting to a human. He would be able to understand his status of the invoice, his status of payment very much on a workflow rather than, calling up someone and trying to get hold of the information. Moving to the next slide. Next part, which again comes into the P2P ambience, is the employee expense reimbursement. So mostly the employee expense reimbursement, which the accounts department is facing a big crunch, is on overstated expenses. But in case of a robot or in case of AI and ML, it would be able to clearly understand on what are these expenses and whether these expenses are genuine or not based on the algorithms written on it. It can also identify fictitious expenses and duplicate claims that are being submitted by the employees. Not only that, there are a couple of case studies that we went through where we also saw that fraud deductions can be made on an immediate basis, and also like a person who is traveling from one place to another can be tracked based on GPS, and we can also identify on whether the person has really traveled between this distance and whether the travel has taken that much time, so on and so forth. So there are multiple things which are embedded inside this. We'll move to the next one. Next one is contract management. So in case of a contract management, drafting of a contract, could be a tedious job. Now, how good it would be if a drafted contract is given to you for a review and you are just changing whatever is required. So that is what is done with Gen AI contract management. So here, drafting is completed by the workflow. Collaboration of different information from the workflow is again completed. The next one is the negotiation. When we say negotiation, it could be a manual negotiation or it could be a robotic negotiation also. Along with that, we could also have an approval which will be completed on the workflow itself, and thereby it could be signed by both the parties together on the documents. Post this, the documents could be stored as a repository, to be taken back or taken as and when required. It could be revised, and then based on that, the renewal of the contract could also be made. Moving on to the next slide. So now coming to the benefits of Gen AI. What do we actually see as a benefit? One is your compliance and security. That is the most important thing which we are looking at Gen AI for. Okay. The second one is your financial planning is completed. When we talk about data, if the data is fine, then there could be many, many interpretations. There is one fine case study which I just got to read some days back. It says that the recruitment agency of a very big organization, okay, had analytics done, and based on the analytics, they could see that the worldwide recruitment had some biased decisions on the basis of gender. So this came into picture when they did the big data analysis. So such analysis is only possible when we start using Gen AI. Yeah. Similarly, forecasting, how good it would be for a CFO to understand on what would be the cash inflow or cash outflow which is expected in 2 months down the lane, 4 months down the lane, so on and so forth. Similarly, reduced errors. Everyone wants to see a reduced error in every part of the transaction. So that is again possible with the use of Gen AI. Next one is better compliance. So when we say compliance, be it an audit authority, be it an organizational audit, internal audit, external audit, everybody looks for better compliance. And here we would be able to retrieve the data, have an audit trail, and compile the data as much as possible with the compliance part with Gen AI. And thereby we have a complete value add. So that is the benefits of Gen AI. We'll move to the next slide. However, when we talk about the benefits, we also have to talk about some of the most important factors which needs to be taken care while implementing Gen AI. We'll move to the next slide, please. So the right formula for introducing of the AI techniques would be, first one is use cases. So the most important decision which we need to take is that as an organization, what are the most valuable use cases and which would be able to be implemented in the quickest of time. So time value to money is what we need to look at while implementing Gen AI techniques. The second one is the skills. Does the organization have the required skills to use AI techniques, or it needs to hire a consultant who would be able to help you out in identifying the best of AI techniques? The third one is the data, most important thing, right? So we cannot have a data which is completely messed up, and then we ask Gen AI to predict us results, and obviously the results are going to be not too right. So that is why it's important to have the data in place. Next is technology. Obviously, Gen AI is possible with technology. Given the problem, skill set, and the data, the techniques would be defined by the technology. And as far as the organization, we need to have some proof of concepts where the expertise would reside. Now, we spoke about procure-to-pay. Do we have to automate the entire procure-to-pay part, or do we have to go in segmentation? So these are the decisions which are extremely important for the organization to take. Yeah. So with that, again, to transform to procure-to-pay or transform the entire procure-to-pay cycle, we need to have an improved financial planning. We can have a better forecasting, reduced errors, better compliance, and thereby a complete value add. And that would be the right formula for introduction of AI techniques. Thanks everyone for the patient listening, and we can go to the questions part now.
Sure. Thank you, Supraja. I will just read out the questions that our audience has pasted in the chat box, starting with the first question. How does the use of AI enhance turnaround time and accuracy in procure-to-pay processes, and what specific improvements can be observed?
That's a very nice question. So, what are the most important? How does it turn around the time, right? Like now, the invoice which is being submitted by the vendor as a paper, okay, just moves from desk to desk, right? So, instead of that, if the invoice is being submitted on a vendor portal, okay, it reaches the invoice processing desk within minutes. And we also have, tracks of where this invoice is lying and how long is it going to take for the invoice to actually get processed, and how long it's actually going to sit in the approver desk or anything could be easily tracked and monitored on a real time basis. This real time monitoring helps us in completing the end to end TAT or reducing the end to end TAT phenomenally. Yeah. Again, as far as the vendor management is concerned, okay, like the vendor is submitting data, vendor is submitting most important documents. These documents are going to be verified. If it's going to be a human who is going to be verifying all these documents and giving you the compliance, so it's going to take time, right? While if it's going to be verified by a bot, the documents are going to be cleared at a much speeder rate, and that is where the TAT is actually going to be reduced. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Supraja. The second question is, in what ways is AI transforming the finance sector?
AI is completely transforming the finance sector. As I told you, we just spoke about P2P, but the finance sector as such, risk management is one, portfolio management is one, algorithm, trading algorithm is another one. Then fraud reduction is the next one. Then we have blockchain, wealth management. Then we have finance forecasting, so on and so forth. So, yeah.
All right. The third question is, what are the methods for implementing AI in vendor management?
The most important methods that I would say is, creating or deploying a workflow, which will help us in, receiving the invoice on time. And once the invoice is received on time, it's not only about the invoice, it's also about the documents which the vendor is submitting, as a mandatory documents. So all these could be submitted at one portal, and it could be a repository which he can, use to take whenever required, and the organization can refer to it as whenever required, and thereby the compliance is also met, and the TAT is also being maintained.
Sure. The fourth question is, what steps are involved in digitizing invoice processing?
So digitization of invoice processing would require multiple types of activities. One could be scanning the invoice, which is a physical invoice, could be scanned and it could be digitized. Else, it could be directly imported from the ERP of the organization or the vendor organization, and it could be ingested into the workflow. And thereby, if it is a digital signed invoice, then most of the countries do not need a physical copy. But however, that depends on country to country and their compliance systems.
The last question that we have from our audience is, what are the major challenges faced when implementing AI in finance?
Major challenge is data, because data is everything, right? So if the vendor data is not proper, then obviously the output is not going to be right. So the major challenge that is faced is with the data given by the organization, and clarity in the organization also on which implementation goes first and which one goes second. So if there is clarity in the implementation plan, then definitely there are no problems. But however, if there is no clarity, and obviously senior management support is equally important.
Absolutely. I think those are the few set of questions we had from our audience, and that actually brings us to the end of the webinar. So, thank you so much, Supraja, for generously sharing your expert insights. As we conclude, I'd like to express our gratitude to all the participants attending this webinar. We hope you found the session insightful, informative, and thought provoking. If you seek further information, please don't hesitate to reach out via email on events@datamatics.com, and someone will definitely respond back to your email. Keep an eye for the session recording and the presentation deck, which will be sent to you within the next day. We eagerly await your feedback in the survey form that will appear shortly after we close this webinar. So until the next session, take care and see you soon. Goodbye for now. Thank you so much.